If I were to be honest, at the moment, I think the Raiden Shogun is looking to be a little bit weak. Well, welcome to another pre-release analysis. Then this time we have the highly anticipated Raiden Shogun, which is going to be another archon unit. Unfortunately, unlike the other archon aka Zhongli and Venti being super overpowered, I don't think that Raiden is going to be super powerful. In fact, I actually think she is slightly weak. But, of course, similar to other pre-release analysis, always take these kind of video with a grain of salt. As the character is not out yet, they could make final adjustment, I could just simply be wrong. These kind of video are meant to downplay character so that you do not overhype on them prior to release. Because she is such a complex character, it is inevitable that any kind of pre-release video, including this one or any other video you see on the internet, is gonna have some mistake on it, just because Raiden Shogun is so complex. So it is of course best to wait until we get her on our hand to do in-game testing, but nevertheless, here we go. But there's one thing I must correct to begin with. In the past, people have this idea that Archon are all gonna be really OP because Venti and Zhongli are kind of OP at the moment. Unfortunately, that is only a sample size of two characters, and we cannot make a conclusion just based on two characters being very strong. On top of that, remember that when Zhongli came out, he was a piece of shit. So the idea of MiHoYo is gonna make a Archon really strong just because they are Archon is honestly completely not true, because otherwise then Zhongli wouldn't be in the situation that Zhongli was when he first came out. I don't like the idea of a character being super OP just because they are Archon. It might make sense because in the lore they are the god, but I don't think that's the proper expectation to have. Is that, oh my goodness, she's gonna be so crazy, so insane just because she's an Archon. Starting off with her normal attack. Now her normal attack have rather poor ratio, on top of the fact that it is not infused with Electro in any way except outside of her elemental burst, which we will later refer to as her sword form. Now, similarly, you can think of it as like Xiao. It doesn't ever make sense to attack on Xiao when you're not in your elemental burst, and that's gonna be the case with Raiden as well. So with that being said, using her to attack on field during her polearm form is just not going to be a very good use of your field time. Raiden Shogun elemental skill is going to be a deployable skill similar to Albedo's or FISCHL's. Now, every time you attack, Raiden Shogun will do a coordinated attack that will also damage the enemy. Now, this thing have a very poor scaling for some reason. At level 8, it have 67% scaling, but when you compare this to FISCHL, who have 142 on her OS at level 8, you can see that Raiden Shogun have about half or even less than half the scaling on her elemental skill. And this is really bad because, well, OS doesn't even actually do that much damage to begin with. Now, of course, this have a permanent uptime since it have only a 10-second cooldown but a 25-second uptime. But when we talk about FISCHL or even Albedo, those characters are also characters where you assume they have permanent uptime. You more or less can have OS on the field 100% of the time, so you don't have uptime issues on those either. And keep in mind that she will only do this attack if you are capable of landing another attack, since it is a coordinated attack, where FISCHL's OS will fire regardless of whatever you do. So overall, the damage on this elemental skill is not looking pretty at all. But in return, you do get a pretty good buff for your other teammate. You are able to grant your teammate a elemental burst damage bonus buff depending on the energy cost for their teammate. So for example, if your teammate have an 80 cost, like if they're Xingqiu's, if they're Shangli, then they'll get approximately like a 24 elemental burst damage buff, and that is a pretty good amount. So in trade-offs for trading damage on Raiden Shogun, you are able to grant your teammate more damage. Now, of course, her elemental burst is the most interesting part about her kit, and let's cover that. But the first thing to talk about is the resolve mechanic. So when your teammate casts their elemental burst, you will gain resolve stack according to the amount of energy that your teammate have expended. You can also gain resolve stack through your Ascension 1 talent when your teammate collect a energy. In total, you can usually expect to get about 50 to 55 resource stacks. Getting 60 is possible, but it's much harder with our constellation one. So we'll just assume 55 to 60 for the time being, which is pretty close to maximum already, so it's fine. And based on the amount of resource stack, the amount of damage you do will increase by a significant amount. So it is very, very important to make sure that you have resource stack before you cast your elemental burst. Aside from that, when you attack during your elemental burst form, you will be able to restore energy to your teammate. In general, you're looking at restoring about 25 energy to each one of your teammate, apparently including herself as well, so that is very good. Giving 25 energy to every single one of your teammate means that you are giving a total of 100 energy in total. Overall, there's 3 major things that she's able to provide. 1, she's able to give your teammate elemental burst damage, which is really good. 2, she's able to give your teammate energy to cast those elemental bursts, which is also really good. And 3, she's capable of doing really good amount of on-field damage when your teammate are on their cooldown and therefore are unable to cast their elemental burst. Now that's also really good. So overall, she is looking like to be a really good character, right? Well, and that's true in a vacuum. The question I need to ask you right now is that what kind of team composition really care about those conditions and is capable of utilizing them? Unfortunately, the answer is that there aren't really many. And even if such team exists, how much better is it to put Raiden in instead of another Electro character, for example, let's say FISCHL, or maybe even the Electro main characters, who, by the way, also is capable of providing you a lot of energy, although of course, in terms of damage, the Electro MC practically has none. A slight problem with her elemental burst is that it doesn't actually do that much damage, but it takes away very valuable field time from your other party member. So your other party member cannot properly do their damage. Of course, that is unless they have deployable skill. During her 7-second uptime, she is only capable of reaching to a similar damage output as someone like FISCHL, and this is largely because that she is Electro, and Electro do not have those big boy damage reaction like Vaporize or Melt that Pyro and Cryo or even Hydro is capable of getting, and therefore honestly her damage output is not that high. In fact, when considered over the full 20-second duration, her damage output is honestly not even as high as someone like a C6 FISCHL who can do all her damage off field. Keep in mind that her elemental skill, while it's deployable like FISCHL, it practically does half the damage that FISCHL is capable of doing, or even more when you consider C6 FISCHL and C6 Ascension 4 on top of that. So that's the reason why. But of course, she have better AoE than FISCHL and much better utility, namely the energy and the elemental burst damage to her other teammate. But when you don't really care about those benefits or you can't utilize those benefits fully, then again, she's not going to be as good as FISCHL, since you know that's the only reason why you bring Raiden in to begin with, is for those extra benefits that FISCHL doesn't have. So once again, I have to ask you, what team really want Raiden Shogun and can properly utilize all of those things that she brings to the table? And once again, I have to say, there aren't many. At best, it's just gonna be either in a Beidou team or just a Eula team, which again, you have seen this before, and this is a situation what happened to Electro MC. Electro MC end up not being very good simply because there aren't really many teams that really care about the energy regeneration and really care about to fund their elemental burst. You can already bring a Diona to field with your Eula, so honestly it's like getting more energy is nice, but it's not necessary, especially if it end up costing you something, for example more damage when you didn't need to sacrifice it to begin with. I think very commonly is that people have this idea of drafting a crazy team with really powerful elemental bursts and then using Raiden to funnel those elemental bursts as well as to buff those elemental bursts. On paper, it sounds really nice. In reality, I don't think that is going to be a thing. First of all, the thing you have to notice is that, well, Xiangling here is running as a solo Pyro. And Xiangling's biggest issue is that she's incapable of generating Pyro energy because of Goba. So the 25 energy is not going to be enough at all to funnel her 80 elemental curse burst. With that being said, you are still going to be required to run a lot of DR on Xiangling, even if you consider that she get 25 energy from Raiden. You can just figure this out right now using a simple energy calculator online. With that being said, if you have to run full DR on Xiangling anyway, then what did Raiden really provide? You could have just ran Bennett with Xiangling just like every other player would do, and then not run as much ER and still do much better damage. So this is one case where it looked nice on paper, but in reality doesn't really work. And this is the exact same case as Xingqiu's. 25 energy, yes, is very nice for Xingqiu's, but it doesn't let you get away with running no energy recharge, or doesn't let you untie the Sacrificial Sword. So you still have to run Sacrificial Sword on Xingqiu's even if you have Raiden to provide you with energy. But if you already run Sacrificial Sword, then on the other hand, you don't need Raiden since the sword itself already fully funneled your elemental burst back up. But Beidou's team is a team where Raiden can work really well. Previously, you would put FISCHL here, and again, basically nowadays you're just gonna replace FISCHL with Raiden. In this scenario, because Raiden is capable of generating electro energy, on top of the fact that she has a 25 energy refund, now you can finally actually get away from not building any DR at all on Beidou and just going full damage on Beidou. And this is the case where the ER benefit from Raiden actually matter. On top of that, Beidou is a character who is incentivized around her elemental burst. So this is a case where Raiden's elemental burst damage actually matters. So when you can fully fulfill the condition of using every single part of Raiden kit, she became a really good character. Similarly, Eula is another case where Raiden could work really well. And again, you basically just also replace FISCHL here. Eula cared for an electro character because she wanted to get super conduct. Eula is also a character who cared about elemental burst damage as well as energy. So once again, you fulfill all three conditions. You're looking for an electro character who can provide all of the above. In this scenario, yes, Raiden will become good. And with energy recharge, or with Raiden giving you 25 energy to Eula, you can potentially even untie the Diona to put it in your other team and just put in something else like a Favonius Lance Rosaria. So this is a case where Raiden does become good. Now, there is potential of using both Venti and Raiden together to generate a lot of energy. My only problem is that it takes two very specific characters or two specific archon to make this team, and therefore it might not be accessible to most players. But the idea is that you run something like Kujo Sara, who have an 80 elemental cost burst, and then instead of running any DR, you just use Venti and Raiden to power Kujo Sara up. You also have to run Jean in this team just because you don't have a healer, and Jean is a animal healer who also works really well with Venti. So now you have a Venti Jean team with basically adding in Raiden. So it is possible for her to spawn new architecture of team. We'll have to gameplay this to test it out. Maybe even just a full Electro type of team. Although if you're gonna run a full Electro team, that's just basically running Beidou. So to me, that's not like new kind of team. Regardless, there is potential still, but we have to do further gameplay testing to figure that out. An example of a team that doesn't work at all is, for example, a Xiao team, because Raiden just simply take away field time from playing Xiao, which is a really bad thing. You want to dedicate all your field time on Xiao. Because of that, arguably she's not even as good as Electro MC or FISCHL's, since those characters are fully deployable and therefore can still do stuff, while Raiden, who takes field time, doesn't really do anything. Again, if you look at a Hu Tao team, what do Raiden really provide the team here? In terms of energy, Xingqiu still needs Sacrificial Sword since 25 energy is not enough, and if you run Sacrificial Sword, then you don't need the 25 energy, so the energy does nothing for Xingqiu, or practically nothing. Does nothing for Zhongli absolutely, since Zhongli don't care about his elemental burst, and Hu Tao is not a character that is practically energy hungry, so the 25 energy is nice to have, but it's not a defining point. In terms of elemental burst damage, it doesn't really change Hu Tao gameplay style, since Hu Tao main focus is not her elemental burst but rather her charge attack. Once again, don't matter for Zhongli, and it do matter for FISCHL, but if that's the only benefit you get out of all three characters, simply running a Anemo character and then doing a VV shred on the Hydro will grant you more damage than Raiden will provide. So in this case, running any other Anemo character will be much better gain than running Raiden. In fact, if Raiden was Pyro, then now you can get the Pyro resonance by getting 2 Pyro character in your party. You can also properly utilize the downtime that Hu Tao has, because now you'll be able to use FISCHL to do vaporize damage when Hu Tao is on cooldown. That means your damage will actually be respectable and matter, instead of doing wet needle damage because you're an electro character and can't do any proper reaction. In fact, if Raiden was Pyro, she'll work dramatically better with character like FISCHL, or Xiangling rather. Again, Xiangling's main problem is that she cannot generate pyro energy herself that well, so she's dependent on another Pyro character to generate her energy. If Raiden was Pyro, not only she'll be able to generate Pyro energy for Xiangling, she'll also be able to get 25 energy for Xiangling. And now, at this moment, you can fully actually untie energy recharge from Xiangling, and it becomes very good, since Xiangling is quite bottlenecked by energy recharge. And of course, the elemental damage burst bonus is also really good for Xiangling, since Xiangling is a character who is dependent on her elemental burst. Similar argument can be made if Raiden was ever Cryo. Now you put her into a Ganyu team, you put her into an Ayaka team, and something like that. She'll be dramatically much better if she was other element, to be honest. One of the huge reasons why Zhongli and Venti is very universal is because of their element. Geo is a universal element that makes you tankier, and therefore you can easily comfortably fit Zhongli into many teams. Venti have Anemo element, and Anemo element is the most universal element by far. Almost every single character in the Anemo category is super universal. You have Kazuya, you have Venti, you have Jin, and now you have Sayu and stuff. Electro character on the other hand, I'm not sure who really cared to put an Electro character in their party. Again, as best, Beidou and Eula, since Beidou wanted Electro battery and Eula wanted Electro characters to do superconduct. But there's just not that many teams that want a Electro character who can provide elemental damage burst bonus and energy recharge and do some kind of on-field damage and utilize it well. It's just way too conditional for Raiden to be good at the moment. Bottom line though, she is gonna be very similar to FISCHL. Again, she might not be doing the same output damage as FISCHL, but let's suppose if Raiden did the same damage output as FISCHL, then she would just be a straight upgrade from FISCHL, since she has better AoE and much better utility. Overall, FISCHL is still a pretty good character, so I think that Raiden will be fine. It's just that she won't be OP like the other Archon, which might make a lot of people disappoint. She might potentially be good in the future because of how unique her kit is and how unique it buffs other characters. But at the moment, that's not something we can depend on. Rolling for a character, hoping that a future character will work with, is like buying GameStop and hoping it will go up. Maybe it'll work out, but maybe it'll also not. So is that something you want to bet your Primo on? That's on you. Overall, that's gonna be the end of the video. Again, these kind of videos are meant to downplay a character so you don't overhype on them. It's gonna be exciting to see how she turned out. Maybe I'm wrong and she's super OP. In that case, it'll be good news for everyone. So, well, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.